fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. We've got Mr. John Copenhaver here as the co-host today.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I am always good.
Good.
Okay,
that's
not
that's
true.
That's a good way to be. And I know you're lying.
Well, you gotta look to the positive and keep moving, because that bad stuff's all around us. Sometimes it's closer than we want it, but anyway, it's all good. It's all good. Speaking of good, we got a great writer with us today, and he's got his latest book. It's called Been Wrong So Long It Feels Like Right. It's a King Oliver novel. Boy, that title just fits my life right now. So anyway, Walter Mosley, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Walter, what's going on in your life? Like, who hurt you as a child, and you started writing about crime fiction?
Well, it's interesting about me writing crime fiction. I was studying writing and wanting to be a writer, and I wrote a book called Gone Fishing, and it definitely wasn't a mystery. There was some crime in it and stuff, but it wasn't a mystery at all. And but nobody wanted to publish it because the two main characters were black people who later became in the Easy Rawlins series. Easy Rawlins, Raymond Alexander. But there's some black women in it, but they weren't the major thing. And there was only one white person in the whole book. And the people that I sent the book to said, well, look, this is a very, very well written book. But it's not commercial. And later on, I found out what they meant by not commercial was white people don't read about black people, black women don't like black men, and black men don't read. So why are you putting this book out here? We can't do anything with it. None of that was true. But if you believe it's true and you hold the reins of power, then it is in a way true. But so then I just started writing again about the same two characters. But I put them in Los Angeles a few years later. About halfway through, I realized it was a mystery. It's a crime novel. And so it was a crime novel. And when they bought the book, they not only bought the devil, but they said, well, we're going to pay you for that, but we're also going to pay you for a second book because we want to keep you, because we think you're going to do well. And, I did. And I said, okay, this is a good way to make money. And I like, writing those books. It's not like I don't like it, but it's not the only thing I want to do. I think, out of my 60 books, I think maybe like 27 or 28 of them are crime novels. And then there's other books.
Right. Why keep the same characters and put them in a different setting? Is it that you have a real fondness for them?
I have many different characters, though. I have Easy, of course, and Mouse, and then I have Joe Oliver and his crew, and then I have, Leonid McGill, another New York detective who was a criminal rather than a cop. There's Fearless Jones, who I have appearing in Easy novels, and then and there's another guy I've written about that I want to write a series about, Archibald Lawless, Anarchist at Large. So I like to write series, but not about all of them about the same person.
Oh, it's interesting. Who is Joe Oliver then? What is that character to you?
Well, for me, it's the first time I ever wrote about anybody who was a policeman and is now, a private detective, which, it's just a new thing for me. It's the police have never interested me. And, and what they do and why they do it and how they do it, is, like my characters, I just try to avoid it, But I ended up writing about this guy, and it was a lot of fun, because he was so committed to being a policeman that it almost got him killed by the police. And so now he's living a life that's the opposite of what he thought he was going to be doing. And that, that comes out a lot in this book, actually, because it deals with him looking for his father, who he's always considered a criminal. I'm not sure he was a criminal, but and now he has to find him. And that brings up all of the anger that he has toward his father. But also, it brings up all the love that he has for his father.
I have a question. You said, you don't really feel drawn to police as sort of central characters. And of course, some of your most famous characters are PIs. Can you talk a little more about why? And I think sort of hovering for me around this is that, a lot of marginalized writers, traditionally marginalized writers steer clear of police type characters. I know that's not entirely true, so I'm being a little coy, but I do think there's a theme there. I'm curious if you thought about that a lot or how you've approached that.
Well, there's one of the Easy books. He's worked for this very rich guy. He saved his fortune, but the guy couldn't get the fortune, so he couldn't pay Easy until like maybe a year. And so the guy he gives him his Rolls Royce for $1, and one of those really expensive Rolls Royces, and he says, you have to, if I pay you within the year, you have to sell it back to me for $1. He says, great. And he's driving, Easy loves it. He has a Rolls Royce. He's driving around. He gets stopped by these police, and they pull him over and they search him and they do this and they do that, and and they're making up all these things that he did wrong. And it goes on for a while. It goes on for like maybe a half an hour or 45 minutes, and they're angry at him because he's not, kowtowing. And Easy starts to remember. He says, if I added up all the 5 and 10 and 15 minutes, all the 20 minutes that I had to give to policemen, to MPs, to salesmen, to people who run gas stations, to people in the bank, he would have enough years to make himself a 16-year-old boy. That attitude that Easy has about the police, I have about the police. They've changed to some degree in some places, but it's always been a thing. Like, me trying to do what's right is definitely going to end up being wrong in a lot of the official arenas, and that's America, and you have to love it, but at the same time, and I think that Joe has that problem. And Joe said, "Oh, I proved that all these people were dealing heroin. I can't help it that 2 police captains were part of that, But, and of course, it's not because Joe is black that this happened to him. It's because he was trying to do what's right. But the issue in the end becomes that, trying to do what's right. If you see what's wrong and you say, no, I'm not going to take this, I worked with a guy named Bud Grogan. Bud was just one of those guys who was naturally monstrously strong. We were a white guy. We worked as janitors, moving around from school to school. And he was explaining to me that, because they almost kicked him out because he had a felony conviction. And I asked him what happened. He said, well, he was walking down the street and his police had stopped this guy and they were picking on him and they were starting to beat him. And Bud, Bud, who wasn't really the smartest guy, said, this is wrong. And he picked a fight with the cops. And of course, ultimately, when more cops were called, he lost. And the only thing that kept him from going to prison was when the judge saw him, he was so beaten up that the judge said, look, you're guilty, but you've already paid for it. Go on home, And I think that a lot of people who read my books understand that, depending on what their background is, racially, religiously, politically, whatever,
Well, it seems more than ever these days that, corrupt systems are on our minds. And, I think crime fiction in interesting ways can, address that. I'm also interested in, I guess noir is at times a little hard to define, but I definitely think of your writing as noir. And I would love for you to respond to that a little bit. Do you think it's noir or am I off base?
Well, the original definition of noir is crime stories on film. Mm-hmm. It's actually the way the films are shot.
Right.
The kind of darkness, the kind of, the heaviness, the how you can't trust anybody anywhere at any time, how the main characters, and it's turned out that people that writers have kind of, taken that on. So, well, I write noir. I'm not sure I write noir. I guess I might. My characters are pretty, questionable, though I love them. Easy has friends, my God, Jackson Blue, who's, his whole life was, being, a genius and a thief, Mouse, who will kill anybody at any time for any reason, Mouse's new girlfriend, who is a Viet Cong, not even ex-Viet Cong. She's Viet Cong, but she's come to America. She's snuck over, and she's Mouse's girlfriend. All of these people, they're tough, and they're dangerous because of what they know. And I think more about that than I do about the style of how my writing goes to it, is reflected by another style. I love The Maltese Falcon. And if you ever seen a noir book, that's a noir.
Oh yeah.
Book. And Kane's work, I think is wonderful. I love the work. I'm not trying to copy them. I'm not trying to write things like that. I'm writing about something else. I'm telling different kinds of stories. And there are crime stories. Sometimes they're mysteries. Sometimes they're not.
Do you have a subtext or a meaning? Is there something you hope the reader gets out of it besides the entertainment?
I really believe in art in general, that if you tell the story, if you say what it is that you're imagining, what you're feeling, there will be, underlying meanings, metaphors, ideas. But I don't have any expectation of the reader. I just hope that I write good enough books that when people think about them, they have really good ideas. Very often I talk to people and they say, God, I realized that what Easy was thinking was blah, 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 blah. What Joe Oliver was thinking was blah, blah, blah. And I go, yeah, right. I didn't think it at all. But, they did. So I guess it's true.
Where do you get a lot of your characters from? Are they influenced from people you've met in life or you see or know or things like that? Or are they just totally just come out of your imagination?
Well, a lot of stuff comes out of my imagination, but everything comes from me and my experiences. One of the, I was talking to some people the other day about Easy Rawlins. And, I wrote the book. A lot of people, talked about it. I said, I wrote the book to kind of celebrate my father and people that my father knew, black men who were so extraordinary in the community, who never appear in any kind of media, television, movies, plays, still don't. I mean, really, honestly, just like everyday guys who you couldn't really define by race, they're good people, they're hardworking people, they're smart in certain ways because they've had to be smart in those ways. And so people would write about that. And I was talking to my dad. I said, so Dad, you got the book? So yeah, I read it. And I said, okay, well, what do you think? And he said, well, people say that it's me in this book. And I said, yeah, what do you think about that? And he looked at me and he said, I don't see it. Now, even if it did come from my dad, the guy who actually lives that life says, no, that's not me. And I think that saying that, it speaks to creativity, how you take something and no matter how hard you try to be true to it, you make something up. Well,
then how do you experience these characters, like the main characters? Do you hear them, see them, or how is that relationship for you?
Every character, every character throughout all the books, I care about all of them a lot. I want people to be able to feel the words that people say and the decisions that they make. I want, because I care so much about that, I'm writing about people who, like I say, on the whole don't appear in fiction and don't appear in stories. And, it's happening more and more, but I try to stay away from the straightforward political, or the straightforward, regular characters. And I just want to give their stories. I was writing about Fearless Jones, and Fearless Jones, he's a tough guy, very, very tough guy. But he's very sweet, and he's not all that intellectually smart, but he knows if you're lying. You can't lie to Fearless, no matter how smart you are. And he saves Easy's life. These three guys jump Easy. Fearless comes from behind and he knocks them down one after another. Just knocks them all down. And they're tough guys. And Easy said, man, how do you even do that? And Fearless says, well, when I was a kid, I was like, 15, 16 years old. My uncle used to take me out wild boar hunting. And he said, well, what's that? He said, well, you go out in a place where you know wild boar is, and you have some kind of, bait for them. And when they smell it and they come at you hard and tough. And all you have is a bowie knife. And when the boar comes there, not only do you have to stab him, you got to cut his throat. Because if you don't do that, the boar's going to stomp you to death. And I wrote that, and I thought, wow. So this is where I've written like at least 10 books in which fearless has been in the books. And it was the first time I said, this is why he's like this. This is who he is, because, that kind of training, that's better than military training. I was like, yeah. And there's an open door in my life of writing where the character can become more, can change, can have more depth, to themselves and their histories, and that's what it's about. It's not on purpose. It's not planned out. It's just, somebody just saved your life. He knocked out 3 dudes who were about to kill you. And the first thing he said, man, how the hell did you do that? And he answers the question. And I'm just writing. I'm just writing. And that's what happens.
How important is the setting? Is the setting like a character to you?
Well, setting has to be, everything in writing has to be believable. Everything in writing has to be true. And the toughest thing in writing, and this is anything, like, I'm talking about, crime fiction, but it's anything. You want to describe a hospital room with a man a dying man in a bed, and if you went through all the details of that room, there's hundreds of thousands of details in that room alone. You have to present maybe 12 or 13, and that has to be enough for the person, the reader, to believe in that room and to feel that room and to the heat, the breathing, the smell, whatever, So you need to put a little alcohol in there. Do you need to, what do you need to do? And that is, I think it's I was doing a reading a long time ago, and I don't remember what I was reading, but a guy came up to me afterwards and he said, yeah, Mosley, that guy in there, the guy, Mouse, he was in a house. It was a blue house. It was on Dinker Street. And I went, yeah. And he said, I was born in that house. Now, I made up the house. But that doesn't mean he wasn't born in that house. Because to set up something enough to excite the imagination and the memory of somebody, to bring them to a place that they had once been, that's maybe on that street or, a couple of blocks away on Hooper or whatever. And the house might have been blue or green or whatever. It was enough that this guy could believe in what he's being told. And, that's like, and so you asked a question about place. Place has to always be that. It always has to be that strong. And you have to do it with the lightest touches, which is, I'm glad I never thought about it until about the 10th or 12th book, because if somebody told me that, I would never even start writing.
You have been publishing since 1990. Devil in the Blue Dress came out in 90, if I'm recalling correctly. And I'm just curious, because you've seen kind of the crime fiction, develop over those years, change, mutate. Where do you think it's gone? Where do you think it's headed? What's on your mind about that?
Well, I think that when it's topical. So, if there was a war or and somebody could be a veteran of that war or involved in that war, it would be like, talking about things like Jimmy Breslin, and when Jimmy Breslin was writing and saying things. There's that. So there's a topical. I think that a lot I always tell people that I'd say that the great thing about fiction, about mystery fiction, is that a lot of people read it because it posits that it's trying to solve problems, and people are always trying to solve problems, and readers are really trying to solve the problems in their life because it's so tough. And if you were, let's say you were interested in migrant workers picking strawberries in Central California. You write a story. There's a guy named, Pablo and his wife, Estella, and, some other people, they're picking strawberries, and there's a drama there. Maybe a Steinbeckian kind of thing. And but most people are not going to read it. I mean, really, they're not. I mean, people who are interested in it are going to read it. Maybe not even the people who it's about are going to read it. But if you said, well, Pablo is under arrest because they say he killed the guy who owns the strawberry plantation, and then they go to L.A. and they hire a Mexican detective from down there to come up and to figure out, did he do it or did somebody else do it? You're going to sell that book all over the place because that kind of story is so attractive to people who read that kind of fiction. And there's a lot of people who read, crime fiction.
Yeah, it's a great way to, telling a compelling story is a great way to get a message out. And certainly, your books have a lot of social justice themes, as you've mentioned. And is that when you're thinking about these stories, whether, they're essentially about finding a moral sort of clarity against like a systemic a systemic problem or amoral or immoral systemic problem like the police or something like that. Are you aware of like trying to send that message, or are you just like, I'm going to tell this story and be in the moment and then let the message find its way?
I try my best to keep the stories like anchored in character, and the character can be, because I think that when people are able to understand something that they've, that they have, kind of confused ideas about, if you present a character who's doing something and thinking something in a certain kind of way, and your reader who's, different from that character says, that's just like me. I do that. That's the way I think. And I'm not sure I do what he did, but I would like to do what he did. That then, that's the thing. I mean, that's what you're creating. And so because what people think is unfair is pretty much the same. It's not like there's different kinds of unfairness, it's like, and if you can present something in such a way that somebody sees that, then, so I'm more worried about that than I am about, the political thing. I mean, there's some people who did that wonderfully, like, Andrew Vax, he's a lawyer. He only represents children. He won't even talk to adults. He only represents children and children who are being abused, who are being, sexually, their labor, their souls, their lives. And, he did that, I mean, but even then, the people he wrote about, I don't know if you read his books, but man, they're like, these are people who are standing up for something they believed in. And that is, I think, what's so moving about the books.
Yeah, I'm a teacher in my other life. I teach at VCU, and I teach a class on crime fiction, and also teach creative writing. And so I'm always trying to communicate sort of the power of crime fiction to communicate ideas about social justice and that kind of thing. But also, like, you can't just sit down and write a story and be like, and the moral of the story is, so it's like figuring out.
People have to make that up themselves.
Right. And but sometimes that's hard to communicate. So a follow-up question, or sort of a follow-up question, is sort of how do you, who are your influences? I kind of know the answer to some of this, but I'm sure our listeners don't. And where do you kind of position yourself with them?
I don't understand that second part. What do you mean?
Well, sort of where do you put yourself, or do you put yourself, like, do you see yourself as an outgrowth of your influences, or do you see yourself as, like Sean Cosby or Kelly Garrett, like, these guys are I guess the up and coming, crew, like, do you feel, where do you put yourself among those?
Well, I like them. It's like, I mean,
me too.
But I worry, and this is not about what you're doing, but I worry about not about teachers, but I do worry about the university and its approach to literature, which is kind of is like an ownership kind of thing. and people start talking to you about Shakespeare, and all these people, and you're going, right? There's some people who wrote some really good books, and I like those books, but the reason they wrote those books wasn't to write those books. Like, that wasn't the reason. There were stories. I mean, Theodore Dreiser, when he writes about, Sister Carrie, it's actually an awfully written book, but it's a great novel. And it's about something that he felt so deeply, And so my influences are those feelings, my father, my friends, my country, my experiences, my weaknesses, people I meet, and their weaknesses and how, that brings something, positive, into an argument or negative, I'm more so influenced by people I know who are not writers than writers. I love, listen, T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets is really, I hate everything about Eliot and his life and all that shit, but he's like a great poet. And the Four Quartets, my beginning is in my end. I just, oh my God, it's just so great, and you can feel his struggle to understand inside of those things. And that's, and he's not talking about language, he's talking about, he's trying to get something across. What's that? Garlics and sapphires in the mud, clot the bedded axle tree. Yeah, it's just, just the use, it's so beautiful. And, but even though I love, those poems, I would never try to write, the next Four Quartets or whatever. I don't care, I just like story and storytelling and, I knew this painter, which you probably know him too, is Leroy Lichtenstein. And I was talking to him once and we're talking about art. And I kind of said, so Roy, how do you see art? What do you think art is? He says, well, I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you what it isn't. I said, what's that? He said, if a painter comes to a canvas with a complete idea of what he or she is about to paint, that is not an art. And I was like, yeah, right. You can be influenced by people, yeah. And I probably am influenced by people, but I don't spend a lot of time worrying or thinking or even trying to figure that out.
So I wonder about the dialogue. How do you create your dialogue throughout the book? Like, how do you act that out at home or in person? Do you kind of read it out loud? Is there something you do to make it real?
Well, I try my best. And what I do is I write the first draft and then I read it. I see the things that are wrong and I fix it. And then I read it again and again and again and again. 20 times is not as, I just wrote a screenplay a couple of days ago and I read that screenplay at least 15 times after I finished writing it. I try my best to, and I almost always do, read it out loud into a recording device, and then I listen to it. Because one of the things that you find out is that the things that you've written are ideational. They're coming out of your mind, and, somebody's explaining something. That's great out of your mind. But it doesn't usually come out of people's mouths like that. And so you have to hear it, and you go, oh, no, he wouldn't, there's 11 words in a sentence, and there should only be 8. And let me get rid of those. What are the 3 that I got to get rid of to make this sentence sound like somebody really said it? That kind of thing.
And I love the title. The title represents a lot of different feelings. Where did it come from for you, or what does it mean for you?
Well, I was writing the book, and at one point, somebody says, not exactly, but been wrong so long it feels like right. I've been wrong so long it feels like right. And that reminded me that there was a book that I loved when I was a teenager called Been Down So Long It Feels Like Up to Me. It's a wonderful book. Really kind of crazy, hippie, drugged out book. It was just wonderful. And it was a big book back then. One, that I wrote that sentence, and 2, I remember that book. I said, well, this has to be my title. That's all, titles come from all kinds of places, I wrote a book called, Debbie Doesn't Do It Anymore. And I was talking to a guy, and we were talking about pornography, and we were saying something. I forget what it was, but I said, well, Debbie doesn't do it anymore. And I went, oh, my God, that's such a good title. I have to write a book with that title. It's just fun.
Do you do a lot of research to kind of get into the heads of police and detectives and all that with real characters, or is it just from your own experiences?
Ed McBain over here, and then there was another, and a really, I think he wrote the book One Police Plaza. I forget his name. But anyway, the guy who wrote One Police Plaza was a police captain in New York, right? And Ed McBain, had never been any kind of policeman ever at all. Ed knew everything about the cops. I mean, he knew all the ranks and the things and the rules that they passed that the police had to do then and now and in the future, how they're going to be. And he used to talk to this guy, and the guy would go, "Oh, really? They do that?" He's like a captain, and he's like, "I don't know, I'm just writing these stories," and it's like, and I know Ed loved that shit, so okay, he loves it. That's what he did. And he's a good guy. I like him. But for me, I hate research. I really do. Research is I think the reason me hating research is why I like to write, I like to make up things. And what I usually do is I write a whole book, no matter what it is, what genre it is, how long it is, how complex it is, what period of time it is, no matter what it is, I write the whole book. And in one of my last passes through the book, I look at it in a light way, and so it'll say something, Mount Kilimanjaro is 2 miles high or something. And I go, I don't really know that. I should go look that up, because it might not be right. And that's a stupid thing to try to make up in your fiction, And so then I do that. And then, editors read it and friends read it and people, ask me questions, and sometimes I research it or not. But, novels are, not in the past. Herman Melville, you could almost go out and be a whaler after reading Moby Dick, But that's, before radio and television and libraries and, all these things that give you information all the time. Novels nowadays are mostly about character. And that is something that's very difficult to research.
Well, it's fascinating. So now listen, do you like to interact with readers? Do you have social media, website? How do you like people to get a hold of you?
Well, I have Facebook and I have a website, and I'm thinking about starting a newsletter. It's a thing. Because social media is a labor intensive thing. You have to spend a lot of time on it, and you're speaking to people one-on-one. I don't mind that. I love it. Like when I was doing all these readings, it's great. There's all these people there. We talk about the books, how I write them, what they're writing about, what they're thinking, where they come from. I love that interaction. But, what I love more than anything, literally more than anything, is writing. And that's a very solitary thing. It's not talking to people or anything like that. It's just.
Well, we'll put your website up, your book, everything on our website so people can find it easily. And
yep.
We really.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate being here. The book, Been Wrong So Long, It Feels Like Right. And our guest has been the author of that, Walter Mosley. Thank you for being here.
Really, thanks a lot for having me. It's been a lot of fun. You too, John.
Thank you, Walter.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.